You have any idea what you have done? This dress costs more than you could earn in your entire life.
Madam, I apologize for my mistake, but I never this to happen.
People like you always forget where they belong. You still don't understand, do you? Someone needs to teach you your place.
I made a mistake, but I don't deserve this.
People like you should learn to stay invisible.
Try that again, and you won't leave with the same confidence.
Dante, you're here? This isn't what it looks like.
I know exactly what it looks like.
Mr. Moretti.
Celeste, are you hurt?
Celeste Moretti's jewel clutch struck Beatrice Quinn across the mouth with a sound so sharp it seemed to split the music in half. A violinist's bow froze above the strings. Champagne paused inches from painted lips. Conversation collapsed beneath the crystal chandeliers as if the entire ballroom had inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. Beatrice did not fall. That, somehow, made the silence worse. The plus-size maid stood in the middle of the Moretti winter gala with one hand pressed to her bleeding lip. Her black uniform darkened by spilled coffee. And her shoulders squared in the quiet way of someone long accustomed to surviving humiliation in public. A broken tray lay near her feet. Porcelain cups had shattered across the marble. Coffee ran in thin brown rivers around the hem of Celeste's silver gown. Celeste's eyes glittered with outrage. "You stupid woman," she said, each word dipped in venom. "Do you have any idea what this dress cost?" Beatrice opened her mouth, but before she could answer, Celeste drew back her arm again. This time she intended to do more than slap. The jeweled clutch arced through the air. It never landed. A hand caught Celeste's wrist so suddenly, so completely, that for one strange suspended second, the room looked less like a gala and more like a painting of judgment. The hand belonged to Dante Moretti. He had entered so quietly that half the ballroom had not noticed him until he was already standing between violence and its target. His voice was low, almost gentle. "Try that again," he said, "and you'll walk out of this house with less than your pride." No one moved. No one even dared look relieved. Dante Moretti did not need to raise his voice. Men who controlled only money shouted. Men who controlled fear never had to. He wore a charcoal overcoat still cold from the night outside. Rain shining faintly on one shoulder. There were no bodyguards at his side. No visible sign of the other Empire people whispered about only in closed rooms. He did not need witnesses to power. His presence did the work for him. Celeste turned toward him, prepared with the bright, wounded smile she used on reporters and bankers and charity boards. The smile disappeared the moment she saw his face. "Dante," she said, forcing a laugh. "Thank goodness." This girl. He let go of her wrist as though it had become something distasteful. Then he stepped past her. He did not look at his ex-wife again. Instead, he bent to pick up the fallen coat a footman had dropped in shock, unfolded it once, and draped it carefully around Beatrice Quinn's shoulders. The wool concealed the coffee stains. It concealed the outline of her body. It concealed, just as importantly, the dozens of eyes that had turned her into spectacle. Beatrice stared at him in confusion. Her cheeks flushed, not with flirtation, not even with gratitude, but with the disorientation of a woman who had expected absolutely no one to stand beside her. "You don't have to," she began softly. "I know," Dante said. The answer was calm. That made it somehow more protective. He studied the split at the corner of her mouth, the red marks beginning to bloom along her wrist where Celeste's nails had dug in. The trembling she was trying and failing to hide by folding her hands together. Then, without shifting his expression, he asked the room a question. "Who," he said, "gave anyone permission to lay hands on my staff?" The words moved through the ballroom like winter under a door. No one answered. The chairman of a shipping consortium suddenly became fascinated by his cufflinks. A senator lowered his glass. Two socialites who had been smiling seconds earlier found somewhere else to look. The quartet remained motionless, uncertain whether music itself had become inappropriate. Celeste recovered first. "It isn't what it looks like," she said smoothly. "The maid caused a scene. She nearly ruined the coffee service, endangered guests, and splashed me in front of half the city. I handled it." Dante turned his head just enough for her to know she had his attention. "You handled it?" "Yes, by striking an employee." Celeste lifted one elegant shoulder. By correcting one. The room grew colder. Beatrice lowered her gaze. Not because she was ashamed, because she knew, with the weary instinct of people who have been publicly embarrassed before, that every sentence from this point forward would determine whether the humiliation ended or deepened. Dante said nothing for a moment. Then he looked toward the far side of the ballroom. Mr. Grayson, the estate's longtime butler, stepped forward immediately. He had served the Moretti household long enough to understand the exact tone Dante was using, and long enough to know that no one in the room should mistake quiet for mercy. Yes, Mr. Moretti. Call Dr. Levin. Miss Quinn will be examined now. Beatrice shook her head at once. Really, I'm fine, it's just... Dante's gaze returned to her. Not stern certain, Miss Quinn. There is coffee on your sleeve, blood on your mouth. And half this room has mistaken your self-control for consent. The ballroom fell even quieter. You will be examined, for the first time that night. Beatrice did not argue. Dante turned back to Grayson. Preserve every security recording from the last hour. No footage is to be erased, edited, or shared. At once. Sir. Then Dante faced the guests again. The gala will continue, he said. A brief pause followed. But before this evening ends, the truth will be dealt with. No one doubted him. What had begun as Celeste Moretti's carefully staged social triumph had just become something else entirely. And somehow, that was only the beginning. Dante walked beside Beatrice through the corridor leading toward the estate's private sitting room. Not ahead of her, not behind her, but at her pace. She held his coat closed with one hand. The fabric smelled faintly of cedar and cold air behind them. The gala gradually restarted in fractured whispers. Somewhere in the ballroom, glass touched glass again. Somewhere else, the quartet, uncertain and obedient, found its melody. But the music sounded wrong now, as if elegance itself had been caught lying. Inside the sitting room, Dr. Levin had not yet arrived. Grayson set a first aid case on the low table and moved with practiced efficiency. Sit, Miss Quinn. I'm all right, Beatrice said automatically. That sentence, Grayson replied dryly, has been used by far too many wounded people in this house. Despite everything. A tiny breath of laughter escaped her. Dante noticed, he noticed too, that even now she was trying to make the room easier for everyone else. Grayson reached for antiseptic. This may sting. I've had worse, Dante, standing near the fireplace, looked at her. She said it lightly, almost playfully. That disturbed him more than if she had cried. Before he could respond, the door opened again and a young banquet server stumbled into the room. White with panic, she looked barely 19. Her apron was crooked. Her eyes were already swollen from tears. Miss Quinn, she blurted. I'm so sorry. I should have said something. I should have told them. Beatrice immediately straightened. Lucy Dante's attention sharpened. Told them what? The girl twisted her hands together. The tray was mine, not hers. Silence gathered. Lucy's words came in bursts. The espresso service. I was carrying it past the auction table. One of the photographers backed into me and I slipped. The tray tipped toward Mr. Holloway's grandson. He was right there. I panicked. Miss Quinn grabbed the boy and caught half the tray with her arm. But the coffee still splashed. Some of it got on Mrs. Moretti's dress and ex-wife, Dante said softly. Lucy blinked. I'm sorry. Nothing. Continue. Tears spilled faster now. Miss Quinn told everyone it was her mistake. She said if there had to be blame, she'd take it. She said I was new and I didn't deserve to lose my job over one bad second. Dante slowly looked at Beatrice. You took the blame. Beatrice seemed genuinely puzzled by the weight in his voice. The child wasn't burned, she said. Lucy keeps half her pay for her younger brother's asthma medication. I can tell when someone needs a second chance more than a lecture. Lucy burst into tears again. Beatrice reached out at once, despite the sting in her own wrist, and squeezed the girl's hand. Next time, she said, you breathe first, panic second, and never carry 12 espresso cups like you're outrunning destiny. Lucy gave a broken laugh through her crying. Yes, Miss Quinn. Even Grayson smiled. Dante did not because he lacked feeling. Because he was trying very carefully to contain it, Doctor. Levin arrived moments later and began cleaning the cut on Beatrice's lip. She barely reacted. Her focus kept drifting toward the hallway. Finally, she frowned. What time is the dessert course? Grayson blinked. Miss Quinn, you were just assaulted. Yes. But Chef Marino's hazelnut glaze starts to thicken after 8 minutes. And if the citrus tarts were plated before the room settled, the sugar would already be sweating. Doctor. Levin paused midway through wrapping her wrist. Dante actually stared. Beatrice looked from one face to another and seemed startled that this required explanation. There are 300 guests, she said. Half of them donated because someone persuaded them this evening would be flawless. It feels unfair to let the pastry fail simply because society collapsed for a few minutes. A faint sound escaped Grayson.
It might have been a cough. It might also have been an old butler trying not to laugh.
Dante said, Miss Quinn, sit down. I'll be gone for 60 seconds. You were hid in front of half the city, and the soufflés do not care. There was absolute sincerity in her voice. That was the unbelievable part. Dante had spent his life among people who made every room about themselves. Yet this woman, bleeding and humiliated, seemed far more troubled by the possibility of underbaked pastry. Before anyone could stop her, Beatrice rose. If you are enjoying such interesting and educational stories, please subscribe to the channel now. Let's get back to the story. Asterisk gathered the coat more tightly around her shoulders and hurried toward the kitchens. Dante watched her go then. After the briefest hesitation, he followed. The Moretti estate kitchens were nothing like the ballroom. There, elegance was performance. Here, it was labor. Steam clouded the windows. Copper pans flashed beneath bright lights. Assistants moved too quickly in too little space. Someone swore over a broken piping bag. Someone else announced that the berry compote was separating. 2 junior servers were whispering with the frightened intensity of people convinced one wrong motion might get them dismissed. The moment Beatrice stepped inside, the energy changed. Miss Quinn! The glaze is too thick. The auction trays aren't balanced. I think we lost Table 7's vegan desserts, she clapped once. Not loudly, just enough. The room shifted toward her as flowers turned toward light. Nobody is dying, she said. Though if anyone ruins Chef Marino's pistachio brittle, he may briefly consider murder. A ripple of laughter went through the kitchen. The tension cracked. Beatrice moved quickly now. Efficient despite the bandage at her wrist. Warm cream into the hazelnut glaze slowly, not like you're punishing it. Marcus, if the vegan desserts are lost, then they were clearly too shy for this gala and will send the chocolate pears instead. Talia, wipe that tray before it becomes a skating rink. Lucy. The girl straightened instantly. Both hands on the service cart this time. If gravity wants the espresso, let gravity work for it. Even Lucy laughed. Within minutes, the kitchen found its rhythm again. Not because Beatrice shouted, not because anyone feared her. Because everyone trusted her, standing unseen in the doorway. Dante Moretti watched a woman the ballroom had dismissed as a clumsy maid quietly hold an entire estate together. He watched a pastry chef stop shaking because Beatrice gave him one steady look and said, "Start again, sugar has no memory." Lucky thing. He watched a dishwasher on the verge of tears smile when Beatrice thanked him for moving faster than anyone had noticed. He watched her guide, reassure, reorganize, and somehow leave dignity intact everywhere she stepped. When Chef Marino muttered that he'd rather wrestle a bear than redo the garnish table, Beatrice handed him a tray and said, "Then tonight is disappointing for both you and the bear." The kitchen burst into laughter. And for the first time that evening, Dante Moretti smiled. It was brief, almost invisible, but it was real, Mr. Grayson found him there 10 minutes later. Still standing in the doorway, as plated desserts began moving out in perfect sequence. The old butler glanced toward the kitchen, then at Dante's expression. I was wondering how long it would take. Dante did not pretend not to understand. Who is she? Grayson folded his hands behind his back. Beatrice Quinn. Hired 14 months ago as part of housekeeping, though that title, like most titles, tells almost nothing worth knowing. Dante remained silent, so Grayson continued. She studied event and hospitality management on scholarship, graduated with honors. One of her professors recommended her for a boutique hotel group in London. But she never took the post. Why not? Because her father's catering company collapsed 6 weeks before graduation. Dante listened. Grayson's voice grew quieter. A business partner emptied the accounts and disappeared. Her father suffered a stroke during the investigation. Her mother needed surgery the same year. Creditors circled. The family lost the company, the apartment above it, and nearly everything that had not already been promised to the bank. Dante's jaw tightened slightly. She could have declared bankruptcy, Grayson said. Many people told her to instead. She chose to repay every supplier her father owed, not because the law required it. Because she said people who trusted her family should not be punished for one man's betrayal. And now she cleans guest suites, because housekeeping came with a salary. Live-in quarters and health insurance. It was honest work. She has never considered that humiliating. Dante looked back into the kitchen. Beatrice was helping a smaller housemaid tie an apron properly while simultaneously reminding a footman that Table 9 disliked overly chilled dessert plates. Does she do this often? He asked. Grayson almost smiled. Constantly. The old butler's gaze softened. She buys hair ribbons for the youngest laundresses on payday. She leaves sandwiches outside the security office when the overnight staff miss dinner. 3 months ago, a new houseman broke a porcelain charger and nearly fainted. Miss Quinn spent her own wages replacing it before inventory was checked. Dante glanced at him, and when he tried to repay her, she told him to stop becoming the worst chapter in his own story. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Dante asked, "Why has no one told me this?" Grayson answered with perfect politeness. "Because you do not usually ask about housemaids." The remark should have been insolent. From Grayson, it was merely true. Back in the ballroom, the desserts arrived flawlessly. The guests praised the timing, the temperature, the glaze, the impossible smoothness with which the evening seemed to recover from disaster. They did not know that the recovery had a name. Fewer still noticed that Beatrice Quinn had changed back into a fresh black uniform and returned quietly to service. As if bleeding in front of half the city had been an interruption not worth discussing. Celeste noticed. She noticed Dante's attention most of all. Not desire, not yet. Something more dangerous, respect. Celeste Moretti had spent years navigating rooms, full of wealthy men who mistook beauty for softness and politeness for surrender. She knew how attention shifted. She knew the precise moment curiosity became admiration. And admiration began to threaten established loyalties. She saw that moment now. And she despised Beatrice for it. The next afternoon, Celeste began with whispers, nothing vulgar. She was far too experienced for that. She spoke to a donor's wife in the conservatory and wondered aloud whether staff sometimes became too skilled at appearing indispensable. She mentioned, with reluctant elegance, that some women understood exactly how to awaken male protectiveness. At luncheon, she confided to a lifestyle editor that one should always be cautious when an employee became the emotional center of a house. She never directly accused Beatrice of manipulation. She did not need to. Suggestion traveled farther than slander ever could. By evening, guests were lowering their voices when Beatrice entered a room. A jeweler's widow moved her handbag closer when Beatrice refreshed the tea service. 2 visiting investors fell abruptly silent the moment she approached with fresh linens. One of the junior maids arrived in tears to report that someone had implied Miss Quinn had thrown herself into danger for attention. Beatrice listened, then returned to folding napkins. The maid stared at her. "Aren't you angry?" Beatrice considered the question. Then she smiled faintly. "Anger is expensive. I'd rather spend my energy elsewhere. They're saying terrible things." "I know. Then why aren't you defending yourself?" Beatrice smoothed a crease from the linen. "Because if I begin chasing every lie in this house, I'll never have time left to live honestly in it." The younger maid frowned. Trying to understand, Beatrice touched her sleeve gently. People decide very quickly what kind of woman a plus-size maid must be. Too loud, too desperate, too eager to be grateful, too easy to dismiss. If I spend my whole life arguing with strangers' imaginations, I don't get much of a life. The girl said nothing. Beatrice's smile warmed. Let them be wrong for a while. Truth has better stamina. Those words spread through the staff long before the rumors reached Dante.
But reach him they did. He saw it first in small gestures.
A guest who had laughed warmly with Beatrice on Monday now addressed her without looking at her. A society columnist watched her with bright,
suspicious interest usually reserved for women expected to fail in public. At dinner,
one businessman made the mistake of asking whether Dante had always preferred his house staff, remarkably loyal. The room went still. Dante set down his wine glass with precision. What exactly, he asked, do you imagine that means?
The businessman changed color so quickly it almost seemed theatrical. Nothing.
Merely that the maid from last night seems to have made an impression. Yes, Dante said. Competence often does. No one mentioned Beatrice again at that table. Later that evening, Dante went to the security office. He asked for every recording from the gala. Beginning 20 minutes before the incident and ending 10 after, he watched them alone. The footage showed what reputation had concealed: a photographer, backing up to capture the charity auction display, collided with a service cart. Lucy lost her footing. The espresso tray tipped toward a child standing far too close to the path of service. Beatrice moved first. She shoved the boy clear, caught the edge of the tray with her forearm, took the burn across her sleeve, and turned her body so the falling cup struck marble instead of skin. Coffee splashed across Celeste's dress, then came the part Dante replayed twice.
Celeste looked down at the stain, looked up at the room, and made a choice. Not panic, not reflex choice.
She checked who was watching. Then she grabbed Beatrice by the arm,
hissed something the camera could not hear,
and struck her across the mouth with the jeweled clutch. Beatrice did not retaliate. Did not even raise a hand. She only stood there, shielding Lucy behind her body. Celeste drew back to strike her again.
Then Dante entered frame. When the recording ended, the room
remained silent. Even the technician working the monitor seemed uneasy. I didn't realize it looked that bad, he murmured. Dante kept his eyes on the frozen image of Beatrice standing still in the center of the storm.
It looked exactly that bad. An hour later,
invitations went out to every guest, board member, and donor still residing at the estate. They were asked to return to the ballroom at 9. No reason was given. That frightened them more than if one had been. The chandeliers blazed again over polished marble. The quartet had been dismissed. No music softened the room. The projection screen at the front of the ballroom glowed pale against the dark wood paneling. People spoke in uneasy murmurs. Celeste arrived in sapphire silk with diamonds at her ears and confidence restored carefully to her face. Then she saw Dante standing beside the screen. Her confidence faltered. He waited until the room settled. Then he spoke.
There has been considerable discussion regarding what happened at this gala. His tone remained even.
I dislike discussion when evidence is available. The lights dimmed. The footage played. No dramatic narration accompanied it. No explanation was needed. The ballroom watched the child stumble backward into danger. Watched Beatrice move. Watched Lucy lose control of the tray. Watched coffee strike the gown. Watched Celeste choose humiliation over proportion. Watched the clutch arc through the air. Watched the second blow stopped by Dante's hand. When the lights came back on, the silence felt heavier than any applause. Celeste stepped forward immediately. This is absurd, she snapped.
A private household mistake is now a public tribunal?
Dante regarded her for a long moment. No. A public assault is now a public truth. Her mouth tightened. She embarrassed me in front of everyone. She protected a child. She ruined the event. She saved it. Celeste laughed once.
Sharp and disbelieving. You're doing this over a maid? Dante's expression did not shift. I'm doing this over character. The answer landed harder than if he had shouted. Celeste looked around the ballroom for support. There was none, not from donors, not from editors, not from the smiling acquaintances who had once hovered at her shoulder, hoping proximity might become influence. Evidence had done what gossip could not. It had made cowardice expensive. Dante reached into his jacket pocket and removed a slim envelope. The divorce ended our marriage, he said quietly. Tonight ends everything else. He handed the envelope to Grayson, who passed it to Celeste without expression. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. She scanned the first page and went pale. Dante continued, You are removed, effective immediately, from the advisory board of the Moretti Foundation. Your access to all Moretti residences, events, accounts, and hospitality privileges is revoked. Legal counsel has already been notified. Security will escort you from the estate once you've collected your belongings. Celeste stared at him. You can't do this to me in front of them. Dante's voice became almost gentle again. You did worse in front of them. That was the moment she understood, not that she had lost an argument. That she had lost the future she had assumed would eventually return to her. The room watched her face change beneath the chandeliers. Shock, disbelief, humiliation, fury. Each emotion arrived too late to matter. Across the ballroom, Beatrice stood with the staff near the service entrance. She had not asked for revenge. She had not demanded an apology. Yet justice had found her all the same. And every person in the room understood something they would later struggle to admit aloud. Power could still a room. Fear could silence it. But only decency could make people ashamed of what they had tolerated. The weeks after Celeste's departure changed the estate in ways no renovation ever could. Laughter returned first, quietly, almost suspiciously. As though the staff expected someone to punish it, then came smaller changes. Housemaids no longer flinched at sudden footsteps in the corridor. Junior servers asked questions instead of apologizing for existing. The night security team found that someone kept leaving hot tea and butter biscuits outside the office at midnight. It was never announced. It did not need to be. Everyone knew. Beatrice Quinn continued working as if nothing exceptional had happened. That, to Dante, became the most exceptional thing about her. She did not linger near him. She did not try to thank him in private. She did not behave like a woman hoping protection might turn into opportunity. She simply worked, and the more Dante watched, the more impossible it became not to see her. He saw the way flower deliveries somehow appeared more beautiful when she arranged them. He saw a junior footman confess a scheduling mistake with less terror because Miss Quinn had once told him disaster preferred an audience and should therefore be denied one. He saw her kneel in the staff garden beside an exhausted laundress and spend 20 minutes convincing the girl that homesickness was not a moral failure. He saw her carry her weight literally, physically, unapologetically through rooms built by people who had spent too long worshipping one kind of beauty, and never once shrink herself to make others comfortable. One rainy evening, Grayson found Dante standing at the library window looking toward the staff quarters. A kitchen light still glowed through the rain-speckled pane. Beatrice sat at a table with 3 younger employees, acting out some absurd imitation of Chef Marino discovering a scorched tart. The whole table burst into laughter, even from a distance. Dante could see the lightness she created. She does that often, Grayson said softly. When someone has had a difficult day, she somehow convinces them tomorrow has not yet decided to be unkind. Dante kept watching. She had every excuse to become bitter. Yes, Grayson replied. That is why her refusal to do so matters. For a long moment the only sound was rain. Then Dante asked, Has she ever complained? Grayson turned to him with mild surprise. Not once, not about the work, not about the debt. Not about the way some guests look at her as though service and surrender were the same thing. Dante said nothing. But something in him had already begun to shift. Not into romance, not yet into reverence. 3 weeks after the gala, Beatrice Quinn carried a sealed envelope through the east corridor toward Dante's office. Inside the envelope was her resignation. She had rewritten it 4 times, not because the words were difficult, But because gratitude complicated them, the Moretti estate had given her work when she needed work most. Her father's final supplier debt was almost paid. Her mother's physiotherapy bills were nearly under control, and now that the gossip had quieted, she believed the house deserved a future not permanently shadowed by what happened in its ballroom. She had just reached the office doors when Grayson appeared. "That expression," he said gently, glancing at the envelope, "usually belongs to people carrying either terrible news or brave news." Beatrice smiled. Perhaps a little of both before Grayson could respond. A secretary hurried down the hallway. "Miss Quinn, Mr. Moretti is asking for you." She blinked. "Now?" "Now." A moment later she stood inside Dante's office. The envelope suddenly heavier in her hand than it had been downstairs. The room was large but spare. Shelves of ledgers and books. A single bronze lamp. Windows overlooking the bare winter trees. There was wealth here, certainly. But almost none of it had been arranged to impress. Dante rose from behind the desk, his gaze settled on the envelope at once. "You wish to speak with me." Beatrice stepped forward and placed the resignation on the desk. "I came to thank you," she said. "And to give you this." He opened it, read the first line and looked back up. "You're resigning. I believe it's time. You've found another position?" Her smile faded slightly. "Not yet. I thought I'd begin looking after I left." Dante closed the envelope, then he set it aside. "No," Beatrice stared. "I'm sorry? I won't accept it." A startled laugh escaped her. "Mr. Moretti. That's not generally how resignations work." "It is today." He moved toward the window, then turned back. 2 weeks ago I commissioned a full internal review of estate and foundation operations. Guest retention, donor satisfaction, staff turnover, event recovery, morale. Our hospitality division scored well below its potential. Not because it lacks money, because it lacks leadership people believe in. Beatrice listened. Uncertain, Dante placed a leather folder before her. "I'd like you to read this." She opened it. Her eyes widened halfway down the first page. Director of Hospitality and Guest Experience? Moretti Foundation. She looked up at him immediately. "There must be a mistake." "There isn't. I clean rooms. You manage people. Those are not the same thing." "No," Dante said. "Managing people is harder." She shook her head, almost laughing at the absurdity. "I have no executive experience in a role like this. I've watched you lead banquet staff through disaster, steady employees twice your age, and restore order to rooms that had already surrendered to panic. You do not need a title to prove you can do the job. You need the title because you've already been doing it without one." Beatrice lowered her gaze to the folder again. The salary printed there was enough to clear the last of her family's debt in a year. Her throat tightened. "You don't understand," she said quietly. "People see a woman like me and decide very quickly what position they believe is appropriate." Dante's answer came without hesitation. "I am not people." The room went still. He stepped closer, not enough to crowd her. Only enough to make the next words impossible to misunderstand. "I didn't notice you because you were the woman everyone underestimated. I noticed you because in a house full of polished manners, you were one of the few people who never misplaced your dignity." Beatrice's eyes stung. No one had ever described her that way. Not as a consolation prize, not as a kindness, as a fact. Dante continued. "Leadership is not measured by who obeys you. It's measured by who becomes steadier because you were there. This estate works differently when you are in it. That is not imagination. It is evidence." She closed the folder slowly. "I would need time." "You have it," he paused, then softer. "But Miss Quinn." "Never mistake the uniform someone gave you for the size of the life you were meant to lead." She left the office holding the folder against her chest as though it might disappear if she loosened her grip. For the first time in years, the future did not feel like something waiting to punish her. It felt possible. Spring changed the estate before Beatrice made her final decision. By the time the camellias bloomed along the South Terrace, she had accepted the position at first. The announcement startled the staff, then it delighted them. No one seemed more astonished than Chef Marino.
who declared that if Miss Quinn now had the authority to correct his plating notes, civilization had clearly entered its final phase. Beatrice informed him that civilization had survived worse and his rose pistachio tart still needed more acid. He stared at her in offended silence for 3 seconds before admitting she was right. Under her leadership, the Moretti Foundation's events changed. Not in ways gossip columns could easily photograph, registration lines shortened. Dietary requests were remembered without making guests feel difficult. Junior staff stopped quitting after one catastrophic shift. Volunteers were trained before events rather than blamed during them. Donors stayed longer, employees smiled more. The house felt less like a machine for impressing strangers and more like a place where everyone inside it had been granted permission to remain human. Dante noticed every difference. He also noticed that power altered Beatrice less than almost anything else ever had. She still carried trays when the kitchen was overwhelmed. Still thanked the cleaners before the executives. Still remembered birthdays, preferred teas, the name of the gardener's dog, and which housemaid secretly practiced English at night because she wanted someday to work abroad. One evening, 6 months after the gala, a late autumn storm knocked power out across half the estate 2 hours before the foundation's scholarship dinner. Panic erupted instantly. Candles were misplaced, heating trays shut down. 2 assistant managers began arguing about whether the event should be cancelled. A sponsor threatened to leave. One board member declared the optics disastrous. Beatrice stepped into the center of the room and clapped once. The room obeyed before it realized it had done so. "Listen to me," she said. "The children receiving scholarships tonight have survived darker things than a power outage. So have we kitchen generators first, candles in the gallery, acoustic quartet instead of the sound system. If the chandeliers cannot glow, then we will make the room warmer than light ever could." People moved, not frantically now, purposefully. Standing near the entrance, Dante watched her rally an entire event with nothing more than steadiness and belief. And as he watched, he understood something he had not wanted to name. Respect had deepened, admiration had become necessary. And somewhere in the quiet spaces between board meetings, garden walks and late-night discussions over seating charts, necessity had turned into love. The realization did not frighten him, its tenderness did. After the scholarship dinner succeeded beyond expectation, Beatrice slipped out to the terrace behind the winter garden for a moment of air. The storm had passed, rain still clung to the stone balustrade. The reflecting pool held a broken silver moon. A minute later, footsteps approached. She smiled without turning. "I thought you'd still be with the donors." "I escaped," Dante said. "A useful executive skill." She laughed softly. He came to stand beside her. Close enough to share the night air, not close enough to presume anything more. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence was easy now, earned. Finally, Beatrice looked at the water. "May I ask you something?" "Anything." She hesitated. "Why did you trust me so quickly?" Dante did not answer at once. He watched the wind stir the surface of the pool. That night in the ballroom. He said at last, "I thought I was interrupting cruelty. Later I understood I was witnessing character." Beatrice glanced at him. The footage mattered. He continued, "But not because it proved Celeste was cruel. I already knew what cruelty looked like. It mattered because it showed what you did before anyone was watching you for the right reasons." Her brow furrowed slightly. "You moved toward danger. You shielded Lucy, you took blame you didn't owe. And when the room turned on you, your first concern was dessert." A startled laugh broke from her. That last part may have been shock. "No," Dante said, smiling faintly, "that was devotion." He turned toward her fully now. "I have spent most of my life surrounded by people who calculate. They enter a room already deciding what can be extracted from it. You were different. Your instinct was to protect what was weaker than you, calm what was frightened, and repair what had been damaged. That cannot be performed for long. It is simply who you are." Beatrice looked down. The old ache inside her, the one built from years of being underestimated before she spoke, overlooked before she excelled, Judged before she was known shifted quietly under the weight of being seen. I never thought anyone noticed. She admitted, I noticed. The words were almost a whisper. So did everyone whose life became easier because you were there. She blinked quickly, fighting tears and failing. I have made mistakes. She said, we all have. I have doubted myself. I have let people shame me for things I should never have apologized for. Dante's expression softened. But kindness was never one of your mistakes. He lifted a hand, not suddenly. Slowly enough for her to move away if she wished, she did not. His fingers closed around hers with the kind of restraint that made the touch feel more intimate. Not less, Beatrice, he said quietly. I did not fall in love with you because you needed rescuing. I fell in love with you because you rescue dignity wherever you find it. Mine included. The night seemed to pause around them. Rainwater slipped from the stone ledge in slow silver drops. Beatrice searched his face and found no performance there. No pressure, no grand seduction, only a honesty so steady it made her chest ache. A smile, warm and astonished and utterly unguarded, rose to her lips. I was beginning to hope. She said, that you had taken an unusual interest in banquet logistics. Dante laughed then, a real laugh. Free and low and years younger than anything the city had ever heard from him. I do have strong opinions about seating charts. I know. And centerpieces. You absolutely do. She squeezed his hand. But I was hoping for something slightly less floral. His eyes held hers. What happens next? He said. I would rather build slowly than ruin by speaking too beautifully. Her smile deepened. That may be the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. So their love began the way everything honest between them had begun. Not with spectacle, with trust, 1 year later. The Moretti Winter Gala returned beneath the chandeliers. The marble shone, white orchids framed the staircase. Journalists gathered at the entrance. Donors arrived wrapped in fur and old money. The estate looked at first glance exactly as it always had. It was not before greeting a single guest. Beatrice Quinn stood with the staff in the service hall. No longer in a maid's black uniform but in a midnight blue gown cut with simple elegance and a foundation badge at her waist. She welcomed every employee personally. The porters, the dishwashers, the florists, the junior servers, the newest housemaid, who admitted in a trembling voice that this was her first major gala and she was terrified of making a mistake. Beatrice smiled. Then you'll fit in beautifully. The girl blinked. I will? Of course, everyone makes mistakes at their first gala. The trick is to avoid making the same one with better lighting. Laughter loosened the room. From the far end of the hall, Dante watched her and felt the same quiet awe he had felt in the kitchen a year earlier. The evening unfolded brilliantly. Donations exceeded projections. The quartet played flawlessly. The food was praised. Reporters took notes about warmth instead of opulence. The house, once admired for power, was now spoken of in terms people used for very different things. Grace, ease, humanity. Then, near the end of the night, a crash broke across the ballroom. A new housemaid had clipped the corner of the dessert table. 2 porcelain plates hit the marble and shattered. The young woman went white. I'm so sorry. She gasped. I'm so sorry. I'll pay for it. I didn't mean. She looked around. Waiting for humiliation, it did not come. Beatrice was already kneeling beside her, gathering the larger shards before anyone could step on them. Are you hurt? She asked. The girl shook her head, eyes filling with tears. No. Good. Beatrice said. Then the important part is settled. A nearby donor bent to help collect the broken pieces, then a footman did, then 2 guests. Within seconds, the accident had become what accidents were always meant to be, an inconvenience. Not an indictment of a person's worth. Across the room, a reporter turned to Dante. I've covered Moretti events for years. She said quietly, this place feels completely different now. What changed this house? Dante looked toward Beatrice. She was still beside the trembling girl, saying something that had already made her laugh. Through tears, his answer came without hesitation. The night kindness stopped asking permission. The reporter lowered her notebook. No better quote was coming. Music resumed, conversation swelled, service continued. The young housemaid straightened her shoulders and carried on. And around the ballroom, beneath all that crystal and candlelight, a different kind of power moved through the Moretti estate now, not the power that humiliates. Not the power that silences, the rarer kind. The kind that sees another person's trembling and answers it with steadiness. The kind that understands elegance means nothing if dignity is absent. The kind that turns a mansion into a home, a workplace into a refuge, and survival into something far more beautiful than endurance. Some people spend their lives trying to be feared. They mistake fear for respect because it obeys faster. But fear never heals a room. Fear never teaches a frightened girl to try again. Fear never makes broken things easier to carry. Only kindness does that. Only character, only the quiet, stubborn courage of a woman who once stood bleeding in the center of a ballroom and refused to become cruel in return. And in the end, that was what everyone remembered. Not the diamonds, not the scandal, not even the man powerful enough to stop the room. They remembered the woman who changed it. Please tell me what kind of news stories you like to listen to, or stories similar to this one. I will create romantic stories and Mafia boss-style novels based on your taste. Thank you for your support, and please subscribe.